right, he made it. Thank you. Thank you for being patient. I'm Autumn Phillips. I'm the managing editor of the Post and Courier. Thanks for coming. About 6 months ago, we had this idea that people might want to drink beer and talk about politics, and we were right. And I will make sure they turn off the music. I want to introduce our staff who's going to be doing the questions tonight, and you obviously know the senator.
Why don't you use mine?
Can you hear me? Yes. This is Jamie Lovegrove. He works in our Columbia Bureau. I don't know if you know this, but the Post and Courier has 5 reporters in Columbia covering state government. It's something I'm really proud of. People are cutting it all over the nation, but we are investing in it. And Skylar Croft, our political editor, will also be asking questions.
Let's begin. First of all, we're going to tell you who Cory Booker is.
Who am I?
He is the former mayor of Newark, New Jersey, having run the city from 2006 to 2013. He was born in Washington, D.C.
That's a smattering of applause for Newark, New Jersey. You got to applaud louder than that if you want to keep using my airport.
He was born in Washington, D.C., which is my hometown, so here for the Nationals, yes. He attended Stanford University and Yale Law School. He entered politics by winning a seat on the New York City Council, where he went on a 10-day hunger strike and lived in a tent city near the drug dealing areas to call attention to some of the city's needs. He won the city's mayoral office a second time in 2006, and then won re-election in 2010. He was once described as the second most social mayor in the country based on his Twitter account. He won the Senate seat in a special election, filling a vacancy on the death of Senator Frank Lautenberg. In 2016, he was also on the short list to be Hillary Clinton's running mate, and he declared his own bid in February 2019 for the highest office in the land.
Said nothing about my great haircut. I'm a little upset about that, but okay.
Actually,
Tough audience.
we will be getting to that.
Oh my gosh, I'm afraid. I'm very afraid suddenly.
Well, let's start with the news of the day. What are your thoughts on Mayor Bloomberg's race? And what does that say about the Democratic Party that he's trying to pitch that the field is not?
Well, so I've known Mike for my entire political career. He was like a mentor mayor when I first got in office. He gave me my best advice ever in politics. And if you're thinking about running, pull out a pen and write this down. He said, Cory, before you become a mayor, become a billionaire. Look, I think Mike is, like many Americans, worried about us having a nominee that can beat Donald Trump, and I think a lot of people are expressing worries about the field where it is right now. That said, we work things out in the Democratic Party. And to look at the polling numbers right now and think that's any indication is an ignoring of history. We have never, ever, in the lifetime of anybody here, ever had someone go on to the presidency from the Democratic Party who was leading in the polls right now. Think about it. Jimmy Carter was polling at 1%. A guy named Bill Clinton was polling at 4%. Some dude who married up, he married a woman named Michelle. Right now, on this day in 2007, he was 21 points behind Hillary Clinton. The polls are not predictive. What's predictive is we tend to elect dynamic, energizing leaders who unify people and bring people together. It's why I'm running, and it's why I think that this race is far from set, and people like Mike Bloomberg shouldn't worry too much. I think that the voters, we should trust them. This is a great field. Somebody's going to emerge that can unify our party, even more importantly, help to unify our country.
You mentioned this idea of unifying, and this theme of unity and love have been sort of throughout your campaign. And I think there were cynics at the beginning of this race who questioned whether that was in keeping with the mood of the Democratic electorate in the age of Donald Trump. Has your experience over these last 10 months affirmed or deterred your belief that that's the message to go forward, as opposed to some message of fighting back, of this being an issue of trying to take the country back? Well, where do you see it at this point?
Well, this idea that being a candidate that speaks of love and the need for a revival of civic grace and a more courageous empathy, that is any way different than fighting, doesn't know our history. Look, I know there are people, like I was running for a stage in Iowa to have a forum like this, and some big dude sees me. I don't know if you all notice, I'm a big dude, former tight end for Stanford, all-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. And I'm about to jump up on the stage, and guy puts his arm around me and goes, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And I don't miss a beat, and I go, "Dude, that's a felony, man. That's a felony." Not being like Donald Trump doesn't mean you're not a fighter. The civil rights activists that were my heroes growing up, they didn't take on Bull Connor bringing bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses, but they were fighters, a ferocious, unarmed love that tore down segregation. And so I'm a fighter. In fact, I'm the only person in this race that has an Oscar-nominated movie about them called Street Fight. Now look, it lost to March of the Penguins in the Oscars. Penguins are not violent, they do not fight as much as I do. But there's nobody in this race, and I'm not saying this with any kind of Donald Trump hyperbole and braggadociousness, but I'm just saying anybody who knows my career, I had to beat the toughest machine in New Jersey politics to become the mayor of the largest city in the state. But I'm telling you, what we need right now in America is not someone who's going to match hate with hate or match darkness with darkness. That's not how we ever win. We win by bringing light and bringing love. And the last thing I want to say, for those of you who are really looking for the person electorally who's best matched to beat Donald Trump, let me tell you, King said this, and we should remember this. In a dark time with demagogues and fear-mongers and hate, he said, hold on everybody, what we will have to repent for in this day and age is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. Donald Trump got just about the same amount of votes as Mitt Romney, but we shellacked Mitt Romney. And so to drill down one layer below that, what is the coalition that we need to win? Well, we saw it a little bit on election night this week, the powerful turning of suburbs, like the suburbs of Cincinnati and others. That is one of the key electorates we need. And I come from a state that is suburbs on steroids, New Jersey. But the other electorate, and again, do not forget this, we lost Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, those three states by 77,000 votes. In all of those three states, we saw a massive drop-off of African American voters. In fact, in Milwaukee alone, there was over 70,000 less black voters that came out to vote than had voted in 2012 than in 2016. The candidate we need is a candidate that can appeal to moderate suburbs and get out record turnouts in black voters, which is the exact same electorate that has been electing me in all of my races. In fact, I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named Chris Christie, but he was... In New Jersey, there was a 2013 special election that he could have set on any day. Instead of setting it on the day that he was on the ballot in November of that year, he moved it 3 weeks earlier in October on a Wednesday. First time New Jersey had ever seen that. So I ran for Senate to get into the Senate on a Wednesday election in October. 3 weeks later, it was our normal November election with campaigns on the ballot up and down. When I ran in New Jersey, there was over 13% of the electorate was African American, outpacing the population in our state. On a normal election day, it went down to about 9%. And so of all the people in this race, the person that can best energize and turn out the electorate based upon their past elections is my campaign. And it's one of the reasons why in Iowa and New Hampshire, me and Elizabeth Warren lead the rest of the field in endorsements from local elected leaders. We are going to build a coalition to not just beat Donald Trump, because I'm not in it just to do that. The pundits who tell me the number one thing that people want from the Democratic presidential candidate is someone who can just beat Donald Trump. My response all the time is, dear God, can't we have bigger aspirations than that? Because beating Donald Trump is a floor, it's not the ceiling. He gets us out of the valley, it does not get us to the mountaintop. We are going to need not just unity and coalitions to beat him, we're going to need broader new American majorities to deal with climate change and gun violence and the other challenges we have before us.
This is kind of a buildup of that question is, if Donald Trump is defeated, does the Republican Party revert to the Republican Party that everyone knew of a couple years ago? Or are things so bad now, especially in the Senate where you come from, that it's just going to be a continued animosity with this Republican subset of Trump people?
So I think this is the test of our culture right now. This is really an election that's not a referendum on him. It's a referendum on us and who we're going to be as a culture and as a nation. We are slipping into not partisanship, we are slipping into tribalism as a country, where we hate each other just because we vote differently. And I talk to friends of mine on both sides of the aisle. We laugh about walking through airports now. I get people that will cheer me, pat on the back, and then I'll get people that will heckle me pretty badly in airports who are Donald Trump supporters. Is this who we are? The last classified documents I read, I went into the SCIF where we have to go in the basement of the Senate, and I wanted to read more about the Russians' attempts to undermine our democracy. And when I was reading the papers, I got so agitated because it said out there clearly that one of the strategies the Russians are using is to make us hate each other, is to use our social media platforms, because the more we whip up hate, the less we're going to be able to get to do the obvious things that we even agree on: infrastructure, medical research, education, and more. And so I don't know the answer to this question. I really don't. But I know that I'm running for president, again, not just to beat Donald Trump, not just because my 15-point policy plan on guns is better than the candidate next to me with a 15-point policy plan on guns. This is not an election that's just about the head. It's about the heart and the gut and the spirit of this country. And that's why everywhere I go, I don't care if it's a strategy that polls well or not. I think what our country needs is that revival of grace and decency and goodness to each other. And I can't campaign wrong and think I'm going to govern right. Donald Trump uses his platforms every day in creative ways to demean, degrade, and divide. If I am your president, I'm warning you. I'm warning you. I'm putting the warning label on my presidency. I'm going to ask more from you than any president has ever asked from you in your lifetime. I'm not going to ask you to pay more taxes or put up with more nonsense. But we have to have a new era of American engagement and an era of a willingness for all of us to start working to repair the fabric of our country. And I'll give you one data point, because when I was mayor of the city of Newark, I used to always say, God we trust, but everybody else bring us data. Bring me data. On the things that matter in this country, we are competing globally. Life expectancy in America is going down. In other countries, it's going up. We are leading the globe in horrible things in the developed nations in the globe. But what I want you to think about is, does our nation love our children any less than other countries? Well, if love is really, what did Cornel West say? What does love look like in public? It looks like justice. We are now a nation that our competitors understand that the most valuable natural resource a nation has is the genius of its children in a global knowledge-based society. And they also know science. It's something radical that other countries seem to base their policy on, not us. The brain, 90% of brain development happens from the womb until the 5th year. Well, we're the only industrial nation that doesn't have a universal prenatal care. In fact, we spend more money than other countries on complications at birth, low birth weight babies, maternal mortality, infant mortality. We lead the other nations in that. It would be cheaper to pay for doula care for every low-income woman who's having a child than to do what we're doing now. We don't have universal child care. Child care in most states in America costs more than a state college tuition. We don't have paid family leave. Other countries, Afghanistan and the Congo, have paid family leave. We don't have universal preschool, which I can show you the data analysis that a dollar invested in preschool produces about $4 or $5 in returns in terms of the productivity of the lives. That's not only morally wrong what we're doing, it makes no economic sense. This is not a partisan thing. This is a test of the character of our country. Do we make the investments that help us to be successful? This is what I'm talking about. This is far more about spirit and about culture and about truly how much we care and love each other than it has to do with right or left politics. This is the kind of awakening that I think we need in the generation that's going to come after Trump.
based on those policy issues, which one of the platforms or stances or things that you kicked out during the race are you selling that you think would most appeal to Republicans?
God bless America. So you think this is funny, but I'm one of those guys that went to Washington and said, I'm going to make friends with every Republican colleague I can. And as a result of that, I've passed a lot of legislation as a freshman senator because I took everyone that would go out to dinner with me. Look, Ted Cruz and I went out to dinner, and just finding a restaurant is hard because I'm a vegan and he's from Texas, but he and I passed legislation together. And so I've been able to get I led the big criminal justice reform bill that passed. I led it from the Senate side. And so I actually think about my policies in this way. Which ones can I actually get done as president? So here's a policy that I wish was getting a lot more attention because it actually comes from think tanks on both sides of the aisle. It would be a game changer on issues from racial wealth disparities all the way to dealing with the college cost issue. It's called an idea that, again, think tanks on both sides of the aisle have had for years, called baby bonds. If we had every child born in America had a savings account, an interest-bearing account for them with $1,000 in it. And by the way, we could pay for this whole thing just by going back to the crazy old days of the estate tax of 2009, just the reforms there. Every child in America gets $1,000 in an interest-bearing account, and then every year of their life going up to 18, they get money placed in it based upon the wealth of their parents, up to $2,000. The poorest children in America would be 18 and have about $50,000 in that interest-bearing account that they could use for going to college, job training, buying a home. Columbia University said it would literally close the racial wealth gap in the country and give people agency in this capitalistic society. Now that's something actually that there have been Republican senators that have put in bills because the social science data is profound. Children that know they have a savings account like that, their chances of going to college go up 400%. And so these are creative ideas. Archimedes, if you know the famous quote by him, that's something like, you give me the right lever, I can change the world. This is something that can help us banish poverty, actually give people more resources, and help them get generational wealth, do the things that create generational wealth, businesses, homes, and college education.
Can I ask you about one bipartisan idea that you worked on with our home state senator, Tim Scott, which
Yes.
was opportunity zones. It was tacked into the 2017 tax bill, and it basically gives, it incentivizes developers to develop in or invest into economically distressed areas. There has been some criticism of this program that I'd be interested in your response to. We are in downtown Charleston right now, and there are parts of downtown Charleston that have been given opportunity zone status. There are people like Jim Clyburn, for example, obviously a well-known Democrat in South Carolina, who basically say that the people who benefit from opportunity zones are these developers, are these investors, and that what we should be doing to help economically distressed areas is put more public funds in those areas as opposed to try to incentivize private funds. What do you say, and how have you been tracking the progress of this program as it's been going on the last couple of years?
So again, I try to find the bipartisan space that can create, leverage tremendous change. And so let me just say something about Jim Clyburn. I am the Senate sponsor of his 10-20-30 bill, which would ensure that public dollars are more equitably invested in areas that they're not, because there are rural areas of South Carolina that have to compete for the same grants that New York City is competing for, and they don't even have full-time mayors, and New York City has armies of grant writers. So I picked up his bill, made some tweaks to it, and I'm proud to be working with him, yes, about much more public money being invested in our lowest income areas, in infrastructure, and medical dollars, and education dollars. But on the opportunity zones, let me give you this example, because I took over a city during a recession, which is a depression, that had 60 years of losing its tax base, and 60 years of losing its population. Newark bled almost half its population. And I was dealt this hand of cards, and I had to figure out what to do. And so by the time I was leaving at the end of my second term as mayor, Newark had gone through its biggest economic development period since the 1960s, doubled its production of affordable housing, transformed its school system to the #1 school system now in America for beat the odds schools, high poverty, high performance. And Newark is only 6% of our state's population, but 1 out of every 3 building permits in all of New Jersey was going on in Newark. And the way I did it, one of the things I did was battle through my state legislature tax incentives to bring capital into this distressed city of Newark. Because capital is so lazy in America. 4 metropolitan areas get over 85% of the DC dollars, for example. And so knowing this worked for me in Newark, I went to work with Tim Scott under a Democratic president named Barack Obama on a bill that we thought could get a tax treatment to incentivize investments in low-income areas. Now, we got the bill done, and unfortunately I didn't plan on it being supervised by a Trump administration. And so that's the problem. Opportunity zones is now the law of the land. And there are hundreds of examples of it working. Heflin, Alabama, the local leaders wanted a memory care center for people with dementia, and they're building it right now. There are places that are getting supermarkets and food deserts. There are places that are building affordable housing. HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, there have been special funds to set up to help them with infrastructure projects. So there's lots of examples of it working. But there are definitely abuses where it's going on, where people are making areas that do not need incentive, where developers are making a quick real estate play and getting better dollars. So what I can say is it's the right idea that doesn't have the accountability measures to prevent a bad president from not doing it right. And I can tell you, when I'm president of the United States, this is one of the levers that I'm going to improve and make work for low-income areas around the country.
All right, your quote, "When I am president of the United States," that leads into a little game that we play here. You've just been elected. In 90 seconds...
Hold on, say the beginning of that again. I've just been elected. All right. We need a president without hair after what we've got now. Americans, we tend to elect opposites as presidents, so it's very hopeful.
You have 90 seconds to tell us everything you plan to do in your first 100 days. And I'm going to start the clock now.
Oh my gosh! All right, elect a Secretary of Education that actually taught in public school. Rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. Reestablish the Clean Power Plan and fuel efficiency standards. Oh my gosh, time is flying in my first 90 seconds of my first term. I'm going to make sure that we reestablish transgender Americans being able to serve in the military. I'm going to actually make sure that we having a Department of Education, the Civil Rights Division is going to protect transgender kids. I'm going to make sure that I take those pharmaceutical companies, which I can do through executive action, the worst offenders, I'm going to take away their patents and drive down pharmaceutical prices. I'm going to make sure that my Department of Justice holds local police departments accountable, and we end this system where police departments are having use of forces that are wrong. I'm going to end private prisons in America and stop the quotas. I'm going to stop at the border the violation of our values at the border, stop putting children in cages. I'm going to stop the deputization of local police departments doing immigration work so we can have safe communities again. I'm going to make sure that I establish in the White House Office of Reproductive Freedom to begin to push back on the attacks on women's reproductive rights. I'm going to make sure that we on the federal level begin to enforce voting rights in America again. And I'm now out of time for 90 seconds. That was awesome. That was a lot of fun.
I think it's the most anyone's been in for 90 seconds.
Okay.
So you mentioned that the polls are not necessarily reflective of who ends up coming out on top.
I think the technical term is polls schmoles.
But you know, one group that does look at the polls is the DNC when they are deciding who gets to be on their debate stage.
Which is new, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm curious, I do have a question I want to ask you. I'm curious what you've made of how the debate selection process has gone. But the question I do want to ask you is, you have qualified for the November debate.
Yes.
You have not yet qualified for the December debate. Do you believe at this stage that you will get there? And if you don't, would that have any bearing on how you could continue in this race?
So we've been able to qualify for every polling on our way into the next debate. So I'm pretty confident that we will. However, if you believe in me, go to corybooker.com. Please, while you're there, drop a couple dollars. I would appreciate that. Thank you for the one clapping. Two, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Every clap is $1 you have to now give. So yeah, I do. But look, in fairness, we have an incredible field of people running. And some of the most impressive people that I know in politics, you haven't been able to hear from. Look, Michael Bennett, I know this guy. He ran a school system in Denver, Colorado. He's managed things. I happen to like presidential candidates who actually had to run stuff. He's not on the debate stage right now. And I tell you, when I went to go give my maiden speech in the United States Senate, his was one of the most moving speeches I heard, talking about child poverty, which, by the way, has only been talked about once in 20 years on the debate stage, to Republican or Democrat. It's when I brought it up. I promise you, if Michael Bennett was on the stage, he would have given you one of the more eloquent expositions on what we should do for our children. And so it's kind of weird that in the past, somebody like a Bill Clinton, who would never make it to the debate stage right now in this race, it was a governor of a small state that right now was polling at 4%, was giving difficulty to make it. He wouldn't make the cutoffs right now. So I'm not sure why we aren't using different metrics, like the numbers of endorsements you're getting from local elected leaders. These are people that Democrats have put their trust in, that are in elected office. It's one of the areas we're leading in this entire field of local elected leaders. Why we picked money at a time that most of us would admit that money is perverting politics in this country, and even small dollar donations. If you're a person like Mayor Bullock, who nobody has heard of, but he is a Democrat elected in Montana, for crying out loud, that doesn't have a national reputation, so he's not going to attract that money. So I have a lot of concerns about how they're doing it, but it's the rules of the game. I was taught when I played football, don't argue with the refs. So I'm going to go through this process, and so far the American people have responded to my candidacy in a way that's been ensuring I've been getting on debate stage after debate stage.
This is a question from one of our attendees today. How would you re-energize with our European allies and re-energize NATO? And do you think, what is the state of our relationships with our allies? Are they looking at us saying this is temporary, or are they looking at us saying maybe we should be looking elsewhere for partnerships?
So I serve on the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, and I have the honor as an American to travel around the globe and meet with foreign leaders, ambassadors, peers of mine and other legislatures across the country. And I've never seen a time where I've seen such fear in the eyes of other world leaders, especially our allies, who have really impressed upon me more than even my American pride did before, that this is the indispensable nation when it comes to global peace, justice, and opportunity. We really are the indispensable nation. This planet will not meet, for example, its climate goals unless America leads, pulls, and drags other nations forward. And so, look, this is a president that is got a foreign policy. He calls it America first, but it's really America isolated, America alone, America withdrawing. And that is problematic. He's also a president that seems to like strong male, strong man governmental leaders. And so he has a better relationship with Putin and Duterte and Erdogan than he does with Merkel and Macron and before someone like May. This is outrageous that this president is undermining those kind of alliances we need, from pulling out of the Paris Accords to insulting NATO allies. And more than that, he's taking on challenges that, let me just tell you, we should take on. The Chinese are not playing fair on the world stage. And they're stealing our technologies, they're subsidizing their own businesses, they're forcing our companies to transfer technology. But you don't take on China by telling your allies to not only step aside, but insulting them. It's like me when I played for Stanford, going in to play Notre Dame and telling my entire offensive line not only to stay on the sideline, but you guys are fat. This is wrong, what we're doing. We literally have used a national security waiver. A president of the United States has just used a national security waiver to put tariffs on Canada. Now, I think that Trudeau is very menacing to me in particular because he's got beautiful hair, for crying out loud. but they are not our enemies. We should be joining with our allies. All of us should be standing up to China. And China, if they can split us apart, but if they're facing the European Union, North America alliance, then we can better put pressure on them to do the right thing. And so enough of this. I can repair these bonds. I will be a president that brings us back into the world stage and has us lead again.
You mentioned that you're a former college athlete.
I think I mentioned it 5 times.
A couple of times. I've heard it a couple of times.
Yes.
So there's been a debate in college athletics. I think you're the only former college athlete in this field, as far as I'm aware.
Yes.
There's been a big debate in college athletics over the last several years about whether or not college athletes should be paid, or whether or not they're being compensated enough just through their scholarships. California has sort of accelerated this debate over the last few months in that they passed a bill that allows college athletes to be compensated for their likenesses and their names. Basically, they can get endorsement deals. And there are other models that people are exploring too. And there's been some question about whether or not the federal government should play a role in stepping in on that. What do you believe about this issue? When you were a college athlete, do you think that it was a fair system? And do you think that as the system has developed in the years since, whether or not it has remained fair?
170 policy papers put out by this field of candidates. I'm proud to be the only one that has one on child poverty. I'm also proud to be the only one that has one on athletics in America. And this is a shaping part of our culture. And we give all of these institutions, from professional sports teams to the NCAA, we give them exemptions to antitrust law. But yet we don't hold them accountable. And so please don't think this is about college athletes, prima donnas getting millions of dollars. It's not. What we do to college athletes, it makes no sense. And so let me give you examples of this as a guy who played ball, and the reason why I wrote a long policy. First of all, we still do not have gender equity in sports in America. We have professional women's soccer players on the U.S. national team who are paid fractions of what the men are, even though they make more money and get packed stadiums more. I have a whole section about gender equity. We have a system right now that if I'm recruited by a college, did I tell you I was a high school American football player? It may have come up. But I'm recruited by a college and I make money for the team. I'm one of their stars. I put seats, people in seats in stadiums, and I blow out my knee. Let me tell you what the rest of my life is like. Number one, colleges don't have to honor their scholarship. We have people leaving colleges all the time because they got injured. They're just a piece of meat. You don't get 4-year college scholarships in the NCAA. You get 1-year renewable scholarships. Then I have medical bills for the rest of my life. I have friends that have suffered everything from needing elective surgeries when they're older because of college injuries, all the way to having traumatic brain injury, and all of that they have to pay for. That college that made millions of dollars off of them, they have no obligation. Then on top of that, when I'm in college, you want to know the pressure not to study? When you're in season, I'm not exaggerating, I was spending 70 hours a week watching films, pressing iron, pumping iron, and practicing. You know how hard it was? This idea that people get their 4 years, they play their 4 years of eligibility, and then they end up without a college degree and they're no pro career, and then they can't come on campus. So there's a lot more I can go into. I put a big policy on my website about just common sense things we should be doing. And I know California's made a lot of news, but I've been calling for this since I was a senator, because I bump into guys that have had this situation happen. There's a video game that comes out like Madden, and they have your number and your likeness, and now you've graduated from college, and they're still making money off of your likeness. That your school is still selling your jersey with your name on it, and you're struggling out there in the real world. Come on, there's just basic fairness that we should be doing to make sure that when a child is promised an education and a better pathway forward, that people actually deliver on those promises.
That's another sports-related question for you. Has gambling been good to New Jersey? Is the Trump kind of Taj Mahal promises, when did you see that fall apart, and how much of a damage weight did it leave? And do you support allowing this kind of betting on the internet?
So I just want to just say, we in New Jersey know who Donald Trump is. We didn't vote for him. He was a despicable business person. I mean, despicable. I mean, he was bankrupting businesses in Atlantic City because he wouldn't pay his contractors. He ran a casino into a ground, which, by the way, is a very hard thing to do, because usually the house always wins. He ran casinos into the ground, hurt our economy, hurt the local small businesses. He was a despicable business person. But when it comes to gambling, I'm really one of these folks. Look, I don't drink, I don't smoke. I'm one of these people, as my father used to call me, appallingly boring. But I just am one of these folks that I just believe in individual freedoms. And people are going to gamble anyway, so why not regulate it and tax it, which we've done in New Jersey, which has been something we've been able to use to give it to public education and help our kids more. So gambling has been good to New Jersey. I trust adults, consenting adults, to make decisions for themselves. If we regulate it and we can actually keep a better eye on it when it comes to children and others that might be getting involved earlier than we would want to.
You have historically supported charter schools.
Yes.
In Newark, and that was part of the way you sought to fix Newark education. You know, that is obviously somewhat controversial in a Democratic primary. Teachers unions, you know, have long tried to push back on that. You know, why have you supported them, and what role do you see them playing in the future of American education?
So I want you to know, I'm the only person in the United States Senate that lives in a community below the poverty line. I made a decision with my life. My dad was not impressed with me. I was a Rhodes Scholar, 2 degrees from Stanford, degree from Oxford, degree from Yale, and my dad looks at me and goes, "Boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot." Life ain't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give. And so I took my law degree and I moved into what I thought was what my parents' generation did, who were civil rights activists, who put themselves in dangerous situations to advance my rights. And so I moved into one of the more violent communities in New Jersey and began working. I still live in that neighborhood today. We've made big changes. Schools that now are outperforming the suburbs, new housing, supermarkets and food deserts. We still have challenges. The gun violence problem in America. I had a Shahad Smith, a child that I watched grow up, was shot and killed with an assault rifle on my block last year. But this is my loyalty. You want to know who I am? Come to where I've lived for the last 20 years. I will fight for this country to be real for every single kid. And my loyalty is to children. And so we in Newark found things that work for us. It's not going to work for everybody. Charter schools are 3% of our nation's schools. And I fought against charter schools opening in some communities in New Jersey because I thought you can't open a charter school in a rural area and have them pull away from that. I fought to close charter schools in Newark because they were bad schools. They were poor performing. But the schools that were working in Newark, I just said I am agnostic. My magnet schools were working. I said you're going to expand and take more kids. We saw this college called Bard College that was doing great jobs educating. Come in, run one of my schools. They're now one of the higher performing schools. The kids graduate with 2 years of college credit. I said our charter schools, the ones that are working, expand. And now Newark, New Jersey, if you're a black kid in Newark, and that's the majority of our children, your chances of going to a school that beat the suburbs went up 400%. Our graduation rate went up 30%. As I said earlier, we are the best city in America now for beat the odds schools, kids in poverty going on to college. It worked for us. But if you are like me and know that the majority of our children, remember charter's 3%, so well over 90% are going to go to public schools, then look at what I did in Newark. The first thing I did, the biggest strategy we played when I was mayor to turn around our cities, is what I'm going to do as president of the United States. We gave public school teachers a pay raise, and I'm going to do that as president. Because we've got to attract people into the profession. And I'm going to fight against these Republican schemes that are often to do voucher schemes or charter schemes that aren't equitable and aren't fair, like you all are doing in South Carolina. We've got to make sure we have a nation where any child born in any zip code has not a school, let's call it a cathedral of learning. We need to start putting mental health professionals in our schools. We need to start making sure that school lunches, food in schools are free for our kids. We've got to make sure that we fully fund special education because all of our children deserve pathways to learning. We've got to make sure that education doesn't begin in kindergarten because our competitors, as I said before, are not doing that. We have to have universal preschool. We have to make sure that we stop telling kids that the only way to be successful in America is college education. The majority of our kids don't go to college. Other countries are turning away from a four-year college and starting to do apprenticeship programs for advanced manufacturing, computer programming, and preparing kids for 21st century jobs. And so I will be the education president. I'm the only person in the field right now that can point to a school system that was one of the worst that now is at the first. And we're going to do it again by emphasizing public education, public schools, and I'm confident that the teachers' unions in America will celebrate me by the time I'm done with my first Congress.
On healthcare, you said in an ideal world you'd like to see Medicare for all, but you question the political feasibility of this happening in Washington. Could you elaborate on that, and what do you believe you actually could do in terms of healthcare reform?
Yeah, let me just stand up for this one. I want to give these guys a great view. Look, can we all agree on a couple things? One is we have the worst, most broken system of healthcare on the planet Earth because we're paying close to 20% of our GDP is going to medical care, and we get the worst results of industrial nations. We have a system that incentivizes the wrong behaviors. If you're feeling sick, feeling ill, have a pain, don't go to a doctor because you're going to have to pay out of pocket for your copay or what have you. We push our system towards hospital emergency rooms. The system is not rational. People are profiteering off of our pain at rates that are outrageous. Medicare's overhead is 2%. Private insurance's overhead is 15% or more. And by the way, those of you with insurance, it's not as good as you probably think it is. Because we have people declaring bankruptcy who already have insurance. The system is savagely broken right now, and we can't afford it anymore. We're paying way too much. And so yeah, I'm going to be one of these guys that says the best way to rationalize this system is some form of a single-payer system. But here's the problem. I've spent now 5 debate stages listening to an argument that literally I had an afro before I began this, and my hair has been pulled out because this is insane. A bunch of Democrats arguing amongst themselves. Meanwhile, the other guy's trying to take healthcare away from millions of Americans. Everybody on the debate stage, every one of us wants universal health coverage for everybody. All of us. And now let me go for some of these people like me who believes in single-payer systems. Bernie Sanders is on a public option bill because he, like me, does not think we should ever make a perfect the enemy of the good. We got to get as much good off the table. Now this is the thing with common sense. If you like me understand that you can't get 10 people on a debate stage to agree on Medicare for all, you are not going to get the Democratic caucus of senators, Manchin and Tester, who represents purple to red states. You're not going to get them on board. If you can't get all the Democrats, you're not going to pass it right away. So I'm just being realistic with people. I'm going to fight every single day to get us to the goal that I think America needs. What the end zone is for me is every single American having health care as a right. But I'm a baller. I don't know if I mentioned that before. I believe in every play you got to gain some ground. And so as your president, I'm going to do things from my first actions to lower costs in the system, like lowering prescription drug costs, and expanding access, like doing the things that Obama almost did. He almost got a public option. He almost lowered a Medicare eligibility to 55, but he was one Democratic voter, one Democratic senator decided not to support it. Well, I'm going to get us as far down the field as we can so that I have the same record or better than President Obama, that I picked up the torch and I got millions and millions of more Americans covered and costs down for all Americans. If I'm your president, that's what we're going to do.
I want to read another audience question. This comes from Henry.
Where is Henry, for crying out loud?
Henry Robles.
Is Henry there?
There we go.
Oh, right. Henry, Why are you covering that beautiful bald head up with that hat? Let the people see your beautiful head, sir. All right.
So Henry's question is, would you be willing to accept the vice presidential nomination? And if so, what do you think you could influence policy from that role?
Dear God, man. Henry, you better come up afterwards because I'm going to give you one hell of a hug. Henry, so first of all, I was vetted for the vice president position by Hillary Clinton and got down to her final 2 or 3 choices. And it was a tough vet. I mean, I told her, she goes, well, we need to know how healthy you are. And I'm like, I'm very healthy. Did I tell you, Hillary, that I played football? And she's like, nah, I'm sending you to a doctor. And I was poked and prodded in a way that no man should ever be poked and prodded. I was excited. Nobody should say no to being asked by a president to do something significant, cabinet position or vice presidency. So I was willing to accept it for Hillary Clinton. But I'm in this race because what I am talking about is different than the other people on the stage. I really am. I'm willing to defer to you that there are people on that stage that I've learned from in this presidential primary. I mean, Yang has taught me a lot about math, for crying out loud. I'm running because of the spirit of this country. I'm running because I believe I'm the best person to heal, to bring this nation together, to remind us that the lines that divide us are not as strong as the ties that bind us. And so I don't know what the future holds for me. I just deal with today. I'm a meditator. I stay in the present moment. I don't know what the future holds, but I believe in my heart that I have the right message for the right time, and that I will be the next president of the United States of America. I have no right to believe otherwise, or else I should get out of the race.
All right, well, we have a lot more questions, but we have to wrap it up because time is just getting short here. What we want to do is thank you all. We want to thank Palmetto, and we love putting these together, so please stay tuned to Post and Courier and Pints and Politics and our political page. Next time we have one, we'll announce it, and come out here, bring your friends, and we'll go from there. So what we're going to do is we're going to finish up with our lightning speed round, and then we're going to give the senator the closing 2 minutes and go from there. So your first question is do you and Tim Scott ever get together and let your hair down?
I could write a dissertation with my disagreements about Tim Scott, but he's one of my closest friends in the Senate.
You mentioned you're a vegan. You've been a vegan since 2014. Convince the audience why they should join you.
Because the Impossible Burger at Burger King tastes really good, folks. Look, I appeal to everybody here. The corporate animal agriculture is one of the big things that's hurting our environment. You do not need to stop eating meat. Reduce your meat intake. You're going to be healthier, and you're going to really help the environment. Please consider supporting locally grown, historical agricultural practices. It's really, really important.
Outside of the Bible or any religious text, what work of fiction and what work of...
You know you can get in trouble for the South for saying the Bible's a work of fiction.
What work of fiction and what work of nonfiction has most influenced your life?
Most influenced my life. Don't hold me to most, but when I was 18, I read Malcolm X's autobiography, and it had a really big impact on me as an 18-year-old. I'm not sure if that would be the word I'd say if I had more time in the lightning round to think of it. What work of fiction? I am a sci-fi addict, sci-fi fantasy adventure. When I was a kid, I read the Chronicles of Narnia, and so that's the first one that comes to my mind of a fantasy adventure sci-fi one. So, yeah. I'm sorry, what was what? The Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch of the Wardrobe, those books, yes.
So
I'm a big Kurt Vonnegut fan, though, too. I read Welcome to the Monkey House when I was a kid. I read to my girlfriend, which has been thoroughly mocked by my staff, but we're distanced a lot, and I read for her. So I've been reading his book, Welcome to the Monkey House, which is a great classic short story book by Kurt Vonnegut. Go ahead.
During your college football career at Stanford, who delivered the hardest hit on you? And who did you deliver the hardest hit on?
So this is a great moment. We were playing USC, and I had studied the films, and I was going up against a guy. I'm a tight end. This great defensive player named Junior Seau. And I very much seriously, I just don't believe I believe in fighting, but I don't believe in physical fighting unless I have to, and defending somebody or doing something like that. But anyway, I'm up there, I coil up into like a puma. I'm like coiled, ready to pounce. The whistle, the snap goes, I take every bit of fiber of my body and unleash a hit on Junior Seau as hard as I can. I want him to know my name by the end of this game. And so the first game, boom, I'm out like a rocket. I hit this man with everything that I have, and I feel like I just hit a brick wall. And he didn't move. The running play is going this way. He just picks me up, puts me down, and makes the tackle. And so I run after this guy, and you know, before the whistle, I get another, like, try to block him a little bit futilely, and he turns around and pushes me. I push him. Now we're pushing back and forth. The whistle's blown. This is something that's very much not something I do. And then suddenly I feel this person attack me from behind. One of their players grabs me from behind, and I look behind me, ready thinking this is going to be a full-on bench-clearing brawl. But it's one of my own players who picks me up, big offensive lineman, and goes to me, "What are you, crazy? Don't make him mad." And pulls me back to the huddle. So my sports career is full of a lot of ignominious moments like that. That's why I gave it all up. I gave up the glory to serve the people.
Well, who do you think is going to win the college football national championship this year?
Stanford.
We got a lot of comeback to do.
Yeah. I'm a prisoner of hope.
All right, the last one. We've mentioned a few of them here tonight, but who is your favorite Senate Republican colleague?
So first of all, one of the people running for Senate in your state is a guy named Jamie Harrison. I am deeply biased. Jamie and I met Jamie when I was a Yale Law student living in an undergraduate dorm. He was an undergrad. I knew him since he was a sophomore. And he's one of these guys that has his character and his goodness and his decency as a human being. I love the guy. I've given him personal money. The problem with our Democratic Party is they come here to get the nomination, but then you don't see a candidate again. I will be back here campaigning up and down the ticket because we got to beat Mitch McConnell, but I think Jamie Harrison needs to be a senator. He's running against a guy named Lindsey Graham that I also have a relationship with. And look, when I needed to get the last thing in the criminal justice reform bill, and I was fighting to get a federal ban on juvenile solitary confinement, the White House said no. I was literally fighting with the White House, and the person in the White House conference is in, Lindsey Graham. This is when I am so angry with him. It's the middle of the Kavanaugh hearings, or the tail end. And I'll never forget what Lindsey said. He just says, "What are you, crazy? We can't get this bill done without Cory Booker. Give him what he wants." It's a law of the land now. So I don't boo folk. I work against them. But I've created a lot of friendships across the aisle. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Lindsey Graham is not the senator from this state. Everything I can. But I will tell you this. I will tell you this. Between the whistles, as my coach used to always say, you give everything you can in the fight. And then when the whistle's over and you're going back to the huddle, you know, don't kick somebody. Don't push them. Don't whatever. Shows decency, because that's the way we're going to get things done. And so I have a lot of friends, but the last thing I'm going to say about this is everybody here, we're not going to change this culture unless you too have friends with people that don't vote like you. Unless we find ways to reach out. Unless we show on our social media feeds, are you going to be a part of the energy that we discourage and don't like in our country, or are we going to be an antidote to that energy? Because nothing in this world will change unless we do. And go back through your social media platforms and just do a self-audit. How much am I using my platforms to put energy into this world that is positive, that is unifying, that calls to the conscience of this country? Because there's a Stanford researcher that has actually done the research on this. One act of kindness, they've now can prove this using data analytics, one act of kindness witnessed by others affects 3 degrees of separation from you. And so we have to have a choice to make in this country, which is my father's choice. He always said to me, "Cory, you have one choice to make as you go through life. Every moment you can choose to be a thermometer or a thermostat. Just reflecting the world around you and what it is, or be someone who sets the temperature. This world needs your warmth, it needs your heat, it needs you to be what you were called to do, I think, by our Creator, which is to be an agent of love and light and not darkness and hate.
You can end it there, would you like the last minute and a half?
I'm going to have the last 60 seconds. This is not about me or the candidates, it's about you. And our country is at a crossroads. It really is. If this is the most important election of your lifetime, if you've said that at any point, if this is the most important election of your lifetime, then act like it. We have got to give more, do more about this election. And don't leave it to chance. Don't wait to say, oh, I'm going to see how this primary ends up. Make a decision to support the candidate that best supports your values and your ideals. Screw the polls right now. Support the person that's in your heart, the person that you want to lead. And I'm going to tell you and end with scripture. And by the way, I would much rather hang out with a nice atheist than a mean Christian any day of the week. Give it up for the atheists in America. Yes, amen. But here's some scripture that has more to do with our civic gospel than anything about religion. Where King was killed at the Lorraine Motel, there is scripture written there that has nothing to do with honoring King whatsoever, but everything to do with challenging us. We are in a challenging moment. And the scripture they chose to write there was from a moment where the words actually of Joseph's brothers, who grabbed Joseph to kill him, to throw him into a pit to die. And if you don't think America's in a pit right now, well, we sing this song that says we're the home of the brave, but our veterans, when they come home, are disproportionately homeless. You don't think we're in a pit right now? We say liberty and justice for all, but we live in a nation that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. You don't think we're in a ditch right now? We say that we're a country that believes in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but our children being born have more health complications than other countries do because they invest in prenatal care. We are in a pit right now. And so what's the challenge of King's place where he was slain? The words of Joseph's brothers before they grabbed him to throw him into the pit to die, but he didn't die in the pit. He rose on up to lead a nation through crisis. This is that moment. And King's calling to us from his grave. This is what they wrote where he was slain. The words of Joseph's brothers. Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him and see what becomes of the dream. We have to answer that question now in our generation. What will become of the dream of America? Will it be diluted? Will it be diminished? Will it be divided against itself? Will it perish in the pit? Well, this is our moral moment. We're not being called to do freedom rides or to storm beaches in Normandy, but our nation is on the line. We now must rise up and say that I will dream America anew, that this dream will not perish on my watch, that I will stand for the dream and work for the dream and fight for the dream and love for the dream. And if we do that, I promise you, if this is not about one person, if it's not about a me but about a we, then this will not be a moment where our dream perishes in the pit. That we together, standing together, one nation under God, I promise you, it won't perish in the pit. We, America, we will rise. Thank you.
Thank you all very much, and just stay tuned, and we'll do another one as soon as we can. Thank you.